Yo, what is good, guys? Welcome back to another video. Welcome back to NextGen Wealth. Today, we're going to be telling you guys about the stock market, news, supports and resistance, and everything that you guys need to know for the stock market and what all happened today. So today was a bigger day. We did have Jerome come out. We had President Trump come out as well. And honestly, a decent little pullback for the market. But with that being said, I think we can still continue higher with certain stocks. And we have some bigger plays like Palantir. We had some news with Palantir basically partnering with Boeing, and that brought Palantir and Boeing up in the short term, and we're going to be looking at that as well. We're just getting some insane deals. Like yesterday, we had Nvidia and OpenAI, and that brought Nvidia and other chip stocks up, and now we're getting Palantir and Boeing, and honestly, we're going to get some more deals the next day. With that being said, though, we did have a decent sell-off, and it continued on for the basically the whole day until like towards the end, and then we had a little bit of green with a lot of stocks. I did get into another play with Apple, and I posted over on my X. So a little plug real quick. If you guys want, you guys can follow me on X. I post all of my plays early, post early news. And honestly, man, just stay updated with me. You feel me? Another thing, man, we hit 500 subs. So I just want to say I'm thankful for everything. And I'm here to like kind of teach you guys how to trade stocks properly. And honestly, I feel like we don't really learn like financial health or anything like that in school. So I'm trying to teach you guys that as well. But with that being said, man, Apple is looking pretty good. I was looking at a play at that 253.5 level, but we didn't really bounce there. And I looked for like the second bounce or like the third bounce. We did go down. I was going to buy one, but then I was like, nah. And then when it went back down here at around 354, I bought in. So let's see if this call option hits. It's a low risk play, honestly, because honestly, bro, I'm not gonna lie, we do look kind of weak in the short term for Apple, but normally Apple does have those green wicks in at market open basically. So honestly, I'm hoping on getting a green wick upwards, and potentially we can potentially test maybe 255 once again tomorrow. But one key level to watch right now is at 254.5. We can break above that, look at 255, and then after 255, I'm gonna be looking at 255.5. And then right after that, 256. 256 is going to be a bigger level. We bounced off it a few times today, going to the downside. But if we can bounce above 256 once again, we can look at those highs of 257.5. If you really think about it, man, we're almost at all-time highs for Apple. That's at 260 level. And honestly, why not break the all-time highs? You know, they're getting a lot of good news. Their iPhones are doing pretty well. And honestly, I feel like this news can fade a little bit, but a lot of people are very optimistic about their new iPhone, especially if you get an earnings, man. The earnings might show a little bit more with Apple overall, but I am watching Apple to the upside. We just have a minor little pullback. Maybe we might have a second day of a pullback and then maybe retest like 255 or something like that. And or we might pull back to like 250 and then have a bigger bounce to the upside. But I'm going to be having this one on my radar. Next to watch is SPY. So SPY did sell off like I showed at the beginning of the video. We were at like 667 and then we sold off quickly after that. So some levels to watch is going to be that 663.5. If we could break above that and hold above that overnight, we could look at 664.5, 665, and then 666.6 because we did get some levels bouncing off of that. And then last but not least, 667.5. If we could break above that, we could potentially get to 670, which is kind of insane to say for the SPY. But if we do start selling off some more, some key levels to watch is going to be at 660.5. 660 is going to be a big level. And then going to the downside some more, 658.5. And then all the way down to 656.5. So have these on your radar overall for SPY. I haven't really played anything with SPY, but if I do, I will post on my X, but I don't really have any plays scoped out for SPY overall. We do have Tesla. Tesla is kind of that money killer for a lot of people because you can see Tesla in the honestly, man, we have been in an upward trend overall, but a lot of people do get washed out of their plays. And honestly, we like gain a lot of money and then we lose a lot of money, gain a lot of money, lose a lot of money. So with that being said, I'm going to be looking for another higher high tomorrow. So maybe that's 450 level. If we could break above that 450 level, you could see it get to like 460, 470, 480, and then 500. With that being said, 450 is going to be a big level. So just like today at that 444, we're probably going to see a bounce off of that 450. So you might see maybe a greener wick and then maybe a big gap up. And then right at open, we might go up to 450 and then bounce off of it once again. So we can look at puts at that 450 level, especially if we break below it, unless we get some mind-blowing news with Tesla, then honestly it's a play that you don't want to take. With that being said, man, gold is still doing parabolic, man. Gold is actually insane right now, and we're breaking some new levels, especially right around like morning time to say we did have a new high on gold once again, and gold just has been rallying a bunch. But we had a huge move higher once again for gold, and it's been running and continuing. Also, we did announce a call option last week on GLD, and this play went up 300%. With that being said, we could potentially still keep on going, and I recommend having GLD, at least GLD, on your radar for some option plays to the upside. But man, we made some decent amount of money on the GLD plays that we called out last week. So honestly, stay tuned for some more plays on this. I might have a little bit of patience, see how it reacts. If we continue up higher, then why not? But I normally do my GLD plays like further out, just to give it some time to hit. Last, man, let's look at Palantir. Maybe not last, but we're looking at Palantir, then we're looking at crypto a little bit because crypto is falling still. But we did have a decent sell-off today with Palantir until that deal came out, like I showed before. Boeing and Palantir to partner to integrate AI across defense production lines using the Foundry platform. But this is pretty big, and we went up a decent amount. Went up to 183. Then we had a decent sell-off, but we can potentially get a continuation tomorrow. So keep that on your mind. And then Boeing did have a decent move, but it wasn't as big as Palantir. But Boeing has been kind of consolidating, had a bigger sell-off, and then today we did have a bigger buy. I think they reiterated the 500 Boeing planes or something like that, and then we went up, and then now we got that news with Palantir. So this can be potentially a bigger push to the upside for Boeing and Palantir. Let's talk about Bitcoin a little bit because we are breaking down even lower. And to look at Bitcoin, people call it a safe haven. But if you look at gold, gold is spiking, Bitcoin is selling, the dollar is falling. So Bitcoin should be something that you should have on your radar. But with that being said, we are not getting too many buyers in. But quarter four might be a little bit better for crypto in general. You can look at Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP. And honestly, man, last time I seen Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP selling, I was going to get in, and then like a week later, we went up a decent amount, and it would have been a decent play to make. With that being said, if you guys do want to trade this in a shorter term and or make a little bit more money or not risk as much money, you can look at IBIT. It is an ETF that moves with Bitcoin, and then ETHA is a ETF that moves with Ethereum. And then you can also trade like MSTR, Coinbase, Robinhood. Robinhood is doing pretty decent. I think Robinhood is a safer one just because they have an app and they have way more things that they have. But with that being said, you guys could trade ETHA, IBIT, and then those other stocks that I mentioned. So some other news, man, before we get to Jerome and Trump. Trump did say that Tylenol links to autism. First link in the description below, I have a bunch of courses to help you guys become more profitable. So go check out these courses. With that code down below, you guys can get 50% off, and the courses are already relatively cheap. So today we do have Micron. Micron is a little bit bigger after close, and then we do have some other ones. You guys can screenshot this list if you guys want. Thursday after close, we do have Costco. Costco is going to be a little bit bigger. It can show us where the consumer is, and honestly, just how the consumer is doing overall. But let's talk about what Jerome came out and said. So in a closely watched speech today, Fed Jerome signaled a cautious and deliberate approach to the future interest rate cuts, emphasizing the competing risk of inflation and potentially softening labor market. Speaking at the Providence Chamber of Commerce 2025, Jerome's remarks came just a week after the FOMC implemented their first interest rate cut of the year. While acknowledging the concerns that led to last week's decision, he offered to a measured tone on a path forward. Key takeaways from the speech include the policy on future rate cuts. Jerome stressed that the Fed is navigating a challenging situation with no risk-free path. He warned against easing the policy too aggressively, which could risk leaving the inflation job unfinished. He acknowledged that maintaining the restrictive policy for too long could soften the labor market unnecessarily. He described the current policy stance as modestly restrictive, suggesting the central bank will proceed carefully with how they basically make their future adjustments on the economic outlook. The Fed chair noted a moderation in the pace of the economic growth. He highlighted that while the unemployment rate remains low, it has edged up. The job gain slowed, leading to an increased downside risk to employment. On inflation, Jerome acknowledged that inflation remains somewhat elevated above the Fed's 2% target. He suggests that the recent price increase are largely reflected to higher tariffs, which he anticipates will have a relatively short-lived effect on inflation overall, describing it as one-time shift in the price level that will likely be spread out over several quarters. In essence, Jerome's comments today printed a picture of the Federal Reserve in a data-dependent wait and see mode, basically how they've been for a while. While the door remains open for future rate cuts, he made it clear that such moves will be carefully considered based on the evolving economic data and the Fed balances to its dual mandate of maximum employment and price stability. So, with that being said, he did come out and honestly look a little bit more bearish for the markets overall and not really showing any signs of a promised future rate cut, but it was still okay. You know, it was still all right. President Donald Trump also came out and he focused on the theme of principled realism and basically advocating for the world of strong, independent, and sovereign nations. He outlined his American first foreign policy, emphasizing that leaders of other nations should similarly prioritize their own country's interests. Key takeaways from his remarks include emphasis on national sovereignty. A central theme was the rejection of globalism and the assertion of national sovereignty. President Trump stated that the future belongs to patriots, not globalists, and that wise leaders always put good of their own people and their own country first. He also mentioned more about trade deals and the pursuit of bilateral agreements that are fair. Tough stance on trade. The president highlighted his administration's ongoing efforts to rebalance global trade. He called out that he described as unfair trade practices and vowed to continue using tariffs to protect Americans' industries and workers. He urged other nations to work towards a system of trade that is both free and fair overall. He calls for a burden sharing in alliances. President Trump renewed his call for allies, particularly in NATO, to increase their defense spending and meet their financial obligations. He stressed that the United States cannot be expected to basically spend money on everything. But that's basically the key takeaway. It wasn't really too big market moving, but he did mention more about tariffs and honestly the potential for future tariffs. So keep that in mind overall. We have gold surges to new highs as Wall Street predicts the metal has room to run some more. And just kind of showing this again, we talked about this yesterday, but we do have NVIDIA, a $100 billion deal with OpenAI. So that's a little bit bigger. And looking at the stock market calendar, so today we did have the PMI that came out. It came out a little bit lower than expected, 53.9 with the 53.8 and the 52 to the 51.5. So honestly, it wasn't too bad and it wasn't really too big market moving. Honestly, I did see a green candle when this came out. Jerome came out. We already talked about that. Wednesday, we have new home sales and another speech. This probably ain't going to be too big market moving on Wednesday, but Thursday is a little bit bigger. We have another speech, initial jobless claims, the GDP, some trade, and honestly just a lot more basically coming out. So Thursday and Friday is going to be big because Friday we have personal income, personal spending, PCE, core PCE, and then consumer sentiment final. So this all is going to be big for the stock market overall. So please have that on your mind and on your radar. And I wanted to show the fear and greed index because we are kind of going back down. We might be in neutral very, very soon. With that being said, we are still in greed and that's 58. And honestly, it is still doing pretty good. I think yesterday we were at 63. So honestly, we are going down a decent amount and moving pretty fast. We do have some other news. So Disney Plus is set to increase its prices again with its ad subscription increasing $2 to $11.99 and its no ad subscription increasing by $3 to $18.99. So honestly, for ads, you're spending $11.99. That's not even worth it. But if you don't want ads, it's going to be $18.99. Microsoft has successfully tested a new chip cooling system that basically uses microfluids, reducing GPU temperature rise by 65%. And this is pretty big overall. So watch Microsoft for this as well. But with that being said, man, overall for the stock market, we aren't really looking too bad. I'm personally watching Apple and Tesla. Going to be seeing how Tesla reacts to that level that I gave you guys earlier. That can be a big sell wall basically overall. Apple isn't really moving too bad. We're going to see if that call hits and I'll be mentioning tomorrow. So stay tuned, man. Follow me on X so you guys don't miss out on any plays and early news. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.